All right, welcome everybody. This is the December 5th Working Group LTS meeting. We have no agenda today, so we'll be very freeform and possibly short, but we wanted to jump on the call and see if anyone was new or if anyone had topics they wanted to discuss. So before we open up the floor for topics, is there anybody who has not joined before who is new and would like to say hi?
Hi, Jordan. This is Divya. This is the first time I'm joining this call.
Welcome.
Yeah,
I
have
should have
total.
given more structure. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have total 16 years of IT experience. I'm working in Kubernetes extensively, and also the similar product OpenShift. I'm working. I'm part of Red Hat instructor advisory board as well. So I'm interested to join this Kubernetes open source project because my evening times are free. I would like to spend my time and contribute to this project. Yeah, but I don't know how to join, so I started attending these calls so I I can join myself. That's the idea behind it. Yeah.
Yeah, welcome. This working group is maybe one of the special things about this working group is we need a lot of input from a lot of people in a lot of different roles, and so the more people we get involved, the more perspectives we have. It's helpful. So welcome.
Okay. Thank you, Jordan.
Anybody else? All right. I took a look at the project board. There wasn't a lot there. The things that we had as open tasks were like getting the survey up, and it's up and open. It's going to be open until January. I think Jeremy had sent out some like results in progress. I think he put a link in the Slack channel. I don't actually know that I have access to the spreadsheet, or I'm not sure I have the link. So I didn't think we would sort of look at results in progress again. We'll just let it run. And reminder to signal boost it if you know of people who have feedback or areas where you can point to the survey and let people know it's up and running in the spirit of getting more input from more varied perspectives. One follow-up item from last time was when we were talking about the regression data and whether that should change how we process backports. Jeremy opened up a tracking issue specifically for these three aspects, some of which, can you see my screen just to make sure? Okay, I'm never sure.
Yes.
Some of this is already in our backport guidelines and has just sort of drifted over time in terms of what we actually pay attention to and enforce. So some of it is maybe just a reminder, but there were possibly also opportunities to update the template that gets opened and sort of the checklist for the release manager folks who are, pushing the button to hack cherry picks going in. So you open this sort of over the weekend. I was going to signal boost this in SIG release and see if we could get this actually operationalized. I've already been doing this some. When I get sort of copied into backport PRs or requests for backport PRs, asking questions like these, like, is this a regression? Is this a security fix? Is this, what's the purpose for this and the severity of this? So the more people we can get thinking that way, the better. Yeah, Scott.
I was going to ask, I like those types or that stab at a taxonomy. Is there any sort of existing defect taxonomy within Kubernetes? Like even bug label or issue labels? Maybe?
Yeah, we have labels. They are not consistently applied. So like kind bug, kind regression, kind flake. I think there might be a kind CVE. Six Security has worked on getting like the CVE feed updated, so I think they're labeling CVE issues now.
Kind support.
Yeah. It is not super consistent.
Okay.
Yeah.
I may take a stab at trying to come up with a little bit of taxonomy, and I'll post it as a comment back to this issue.
Okay.
Thanks.
So that was the only follow-up. I think Jeremy had said he was going to analyze some of the freeform text responses, but I think it would actually maybe be better just to wait until the survey is closed and then bucket them and group them like together, save Jeremy some time and get a better idea of sort of the buckets we want to put freeform stuff into if that's how we want to do it. The other thing we had talked about last time was doing a TikTok cadence with like 2 different meeting times. So one that's North America, Europe friendly, and one that's APAC friendly. So I'm going to hoist that into this week's and at least tag Jeremy, but if Micah or I get to it as well, we can send out maybe a doodle or something to see if there's an alternating time, just to make it easier for more folks to join. So nothing to really report there, but I didn't want to forget about that because we talked about it last time.
Yeah.
All right.
And I think that it might be valuable to identify who might run that one as well. Because that's kind of, if we make a time, that's cool, but it should also, whatever time gets picked, should have a person committed to running it. Person or persons.
I would be more inclined to join if there was an APAC friendly time.
Excellent.
I'm an early bird, but this is pretty early.
APAC and Han friendly time. Yeah. And it's possible too that if we have 2 different times, we might want to move this time later and sort of make this one more solidly like Europe and US friendly. I think we were trying to pick a time that was sort of not ridiculous. It's already kind of ridiculous for folks like Nick to join. So we could sort of like make it very friendly for both geos if we are alternating. Okay, cool. All right. I have no more topics. I'll open the floor for anything anyone else would like to bring up or talk about, or
Oh, just wanted to let people know we've started the CAP. Joe and I have started an iteration. I had meant to share it with you, Jordan, so that since you're a co-author on the CAP that you haven't seen yet.
Awesome.
But yeah. We also have like partial prototypes too. So
you want to drop links into the agenda and maybe
if I can find it, sure.
Yeah, I'll drop that into the chat and maybe shoot that out to the mailing list as well, or Slack, or both.
I find these new the new GitHub UI a little bit confusing to find stuff.
I'll mention it just because it was we talked about it in Slack, but there was a front page Hacker News link and discussion about Kubernetes and LTS, and yeah, we don't have to dig into that here, but there's kind of all of the perspectives you would expect. Some people saying, yes, definitely support everything for 10 years. And some people saying, no LTS. This is a vendor thing. And some people saying, it's good to force upgrades every 3 months. And some people saying, upgrades are fine, but breakage is bad. And
Yeah.
I don't know. It's all the things.
Jordan, if I may say something to this, right? I just don't know how to put up my hand because I don't usually use Zoom. I exactly saw this Hacker News conversation, and that's actually why I'm here, because we're using Kubernetes on AWS, Azure, and on GCP. And I find it actually quite good to have quick rotations, and I was wondering what would be the negative impacts of having LTS versions, because now things went quite quickly, right? From these older versions we had from Kubernetes, and we're now in a more stable space. I feel like the last 6-7 versions did not have a large user impact.
Yeah.
So for me, the question will be, what is the impact of having LTS versions, right? And why is there a necessity after the version 127 actually to have LTS versions? Like, are there big changes planned ahead?
No, actually the opposite. The direction of the project has, I mean, there may be big changes planned, but the direction of the project is to make changes in ways that are backwards compatible and non-disruptive. And so, no, we are like the direction of the project has been to stop exposing APIs by default and then turning them off, and to promise to support stable APIs forever. And like I think there's been a lot of discussion in this working group about why people want LTS. Some of that is for reasons that have been addressed already with some of the stability stuff and API guarantees over the past few years. Some of that is related to other things like the need to certify on a given version and how long that takes. And so there's sort of things external to Kubernetes. Yeah, there's a lot of varied reasons people want LTS. That's one of the reasons we have this survey going, to try to understand what the reasons are and which of those reasons may have already been addressed, and which of those reasons are still outstanding. In terms of costs, the downsides are sort of cost to the project in terms of maintaining more branches and CI. Questions about whether all of the security fixes that people want are able to be backported more and more releases back. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. And then in terms of the ecosystem, what it means to sort of have more and more minor versions available and supported means a wider variety of versions, that someone in the ecosystem who wants to write a thing and have it work against all supported versions, it basically extends the amount of time they have to wait before they can rely on new features. Those are the 3 broad costs that we've talked about.
I'll just mention, because I put together and I talked about it in this meeting in the past, some of our observations of doing both a 24-month life cycle and alternating, shorter, longer. And so I linked to that, and certainly everything Jordan just mentioned, but also like the alternating life cycle basically sees you cut out significant portion of use of the non-longer life cycle, at least with our customer base.
And Oliver, I know you said you don't use Zoom super much, but if you can get the chat open, it does have a few links relevant to the stuff we just talked about. Han?
Yeah, if we do the, I mean, what you're describing is the Blast version LTS style, where you have the one designated long-term support. You basically need skip level upgrades, right? Like, if you have one designated LTS version, then you need to be able to upgrade over the unsupported ones, and that is not currently supported today. So
Yeah.
there are technical reasons why we actually can't do that today.
So Oliver, if you have not yet filled out that survey, that's at bit.ly/Kate's-upgrade-survey, or it's also in the chat. But if you have not yet filled out that survey, your input would be really valuable, because as you can see, we're asking a lot of these exact questions because right now the purpose of these discussions right now in working group LTS is to figure out what should upstream's long-term picture look like. Maybe some of it will not look like it looks at the vendors, but we're discovering by talking to people like you what upstream LTS should be. So you're here at the right moment if you want to be in on the ground floor of shaping what it should be, because that's what we're working on right now. Any other thoughts or questions about why LTS?
One thing just related to the blog post, I guess they concluded that we weren't terribly active because they went to the mailing list. So I'm volunteering, I guess, to after each meeting copy the agenda and post it to the list, just so there's some sign of life there for people that might find us via the list.
You said you would take notes, Bridget. I won't let you do that and stop typing over you. Sorry.
Oh, it's fine. It's just, it's great to have you fill stuff in because, of course, sometimes I'm answering people in chat or talking. So please continue.
Yeah, I'm so used to working in Slack that like we're active in Slack. We drop links in there, but I forget that some people just look at the mailing list for activity. So Han, if you want to say something about the cap, or if you want to drop that in the mailing list as well.
Oh, in the mailing list? Yeah, sure, I can do that.
Slack and Zoom meetings are not easily searchable and joinable. So cool. Okay. Were there other topics that people wanted to bring up?
One thing that I noticed when I started looking at the preliminary data is a disturbing number of people, more than I would have thought, picked older than the stuff that I forget where we started asking the question of how old a version people are using. But it was like, I think we said, before 1.21 or something like that.
Yeah.
And a non-zero number of people were like, older than that. And so I'm kind of wondering if, obviously we're not changing this version of the survey now, but I think that we will probably, and I can summarize this in text as well in a moment, but I think we're going to need some kind of follow-up of what kind of lifeboat are we going to send for the people who are on something that they can't easily upgrade from? Because I suspect we have a contingency of the community who's stuck.
Yeah. I actually don't remember what the oldest version we included was. I think it might have been 121. Just because that was sort of the 121 to 122 was like the last really significant set of API changes from beta to GA that users had to navigate. There were a few that trickled in with 125, but 121 to 122 was the really big one. Yeah, in terms of like changes we would make, I'm not sure. In terms of documenting like what is an upgrade pattern or a cluster replacement pattern that would let you get out of that mess, like a blue-green style cluster replacement is a really useful pattern that at least explaining or like letting people know this is an option. Here's how you could do it.
But you need to temporarily double your footprint, which is the downside.
Sure. Yeah. And the unfortunate
Well, unless
thing
you do a rolling replace, but
yeah, it doesn't have to be purely doubled, but then you need cross cluster service routing. The thing I've seen is that the people who are not handling upgrades well often are also have difficulty getting their cluster and workloads in a position to do a blue
A
green.
blue-green, yeah.
I would like to say something about that because I do have lots of experience about upgrading. I find, for example, sorry for making advertisements here, right? The feature from GCP great, which tells you ahead of time what APIs you're using. It's not 100%, but I think that helped a lot in the past to encourage people actually to upgrade. So my question would be a bit, is it not important that we maybe guide the users of K8 clusters how to make a safe upgrade? Because I think most of these people not upgrading are like in fear, like why don't people upgrade from a mainframe? Because they fear that the code does not run as well on a modern machine, right, as in a big mainframe. So this is the same thing, right? And the cost uh, created by that. So if we start to have LTS versions, which I by the way like for operating systems in general and stuff, we are gonna have incurring costs, right, for each of the providers of Kubernetes solutions, right? Because they will have then a wider span of software which they have to reattach or reapply the patches and stuff, right? So there's more likely that something gets missing. You see that very often, like with Red Hat, for example, that you have old RPM packages which have no backport applied to it, and then you suddenly figure that out that the version you're using does not have that specific patch and breaks your things. So the question is, do we spread our focus in the Kubernetes community too much if we have an LTS version? And the question is also, do we not just enable the people to hop onto the quicker frequency we have and adapt the environment? Because after all, Kubernetes is like, if you take Helm, for example, on it, right, you can manage containers on it easily. If you have a build environment, a CI/CD, you replace an operating system with one tag, right? You just write another one, you have another container, and you ship it, right? So the whole ecosystem is kind of built with the idea of having things flexible, quickly shipped, right? And let us allow the flexibility of the whole ecosystem to live. So is it really positive for the whole environment because some people feel pain to then start to do LTS for everybody? The question is how many are appreciating the current state of the quickly going forward, right? And is it not better solved by giving the people with older versions good support and documentation to figure out the problem?
Yeah, I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that the community will do an LTS version. One of the things that I really want to do is identify improvements we can make which would benefit both people who are upgrading normally and quickly and on a regular cadence and would benefit people who for whatever reason are stuck back on older versions. And so things like just making upgrades more reliable in general, or reducing the number of action required items in a given release, ideally down to 0, or when we do have an action required item, making it more than just a release note and actually making it a thing that can be monitored or checked or pre-flighted like programmatically, so that people who are upgrading regularly, they might have 0 or 1 or 2 pre-flight checks to run. And people who are stuck several versions back and need to chain together upgrades, they could just run all of those pre-flights, right? They would be accumulating more pre-flights to run because they're going to have to do more upgrades. But instead of digging through 2 or 3 or 4 or 6 changelog, 40-page changelog markdown files, it would just look like running the pre-flights or checking the metrics, and you would just check more of those. Those are the kinds of things I'm interested in, things that the community can do to make life better for everyone, and along the way, sort of address some of the pain points for people who are stuck on even older versions. But it's not a foregone conclusion that the community will start maintaining LTS branches or have skip level LTS upgrades. We're looking at it, but it is expensive. It's costly in terms of people and velocity. So
Yeah. Also, Jordan, in terms of certification, right? I think, I have done many audits for PCI and other banking standards. So it would be interesting, like when you have a version, when you certify a version per se, right? Usually it's because you have a major version, right? Like when you take classical operating systems like Windows, I take Windows 10, and then you have to recertify 11, right? As long as it's in a minor version or in some part of the version of 11, for example, you don't have to recertify it when you do certain things. Of course, you have to reevaluate security and stuff like that. But the same, I think, applies to here. So the question would be, maybe the number scheme of Kubernetes can be changed in the long term to accommodate these kind of problems to be avoided in the future, right? This is technically not, I mean, Kubernetes, since the last 3, 4 versions, my opinion from a user side works exactly the same, right? Same mechanics, would not need to recertify 4 versions, right? So it's
it makes
just
me
the
so happy to hear
number
you say that.
scheme.
That is our goal. We hear a lot of different perspectives, and that's part of why we're doing this survey. Our goal is to make new minor versions work the same for users who don't care about new features. That is our goal. But we do hear feedback that some people's certification requirements, like every time they put new bits on a system, they have to recertify, like even a patch version. So it's certainly not perfectly uniform. And so we're trying to understand, what's the spectrum of needs, and how many people are in sort of those more extreme recertification cases where every time we put new bits on, we have to recertify and it takes 3 months or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I like that one, because kind of that's for me. Let's talk about business. When you talk about patching, right? You should be able to patch your system on a daily basis, even if on an hourly basis. From my side, we are in like data protection and cybersecurity, right? So we do have things which we patch like almost immediately, which is running on Kubernetes. So we are also dependent that Kubernetes runs stable, right? So the question maybe is more like, do people in the future need to have patches on an hourly basis or not? And is it a question of that organization having to adapt their processes to the modern environment? Because even if you're a bank, you cannot wait like 3 months to get a certification if you have a security patch being applied, right?
Yeah, I mean, we have a perspective. That perspective, it's helpful if it does work with reality. And I think I mean, the whole Kubernetes project, I think, has shifted the way a lot of businesses and operations run production systems. So there's probably an opportunity for some movement on both sides, and the trick is figuring out like how to navigate that in ways that we can bear the costs, but we don't encourage bad patterns, but we actually do work with reality in a way that people relying on Kubernetes can use and consume. So navigating that balance is tricky. All right, anyone else? Oh, there's stuff getting dropped in the chat.
Oh yeah. You know, the way I like to think about it is I feel like Kubernetes is aspiring to become SEMVer compliant.
Where there's no action required going from one minor version.
Exactly, right? Like it is like the aspiration is to become SEMVer compliant because we were just not SEMVer compliant before. And the aspiration is now to be SEMVer compliant.
And it's important to call out like which API surfaces we're talking about. We're talking about like REST APIs and command line APIs and config file APIs, things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like that.
I mean, I don't think we're there yet because we haven't gotten rid of all our beta APIs yet, I don't think, right?
One left.
Yeah, there we go. So we are close, but
Yeah.
we're not there yet. And when we do, we can actually, we should announce it, right? We're SEMVer compliant.
Yeah. 129, right?
129 graduated the last API to stable, but the beta is now in deprecated state. So 132 will. So yeah. The GA version is available in 129. The final beta will turn off in 132. So in a year from now.
I definitely think that aspect of getting rid of API no additional deprecations and removals is worth making sure we get that into the release notes and raising awareness that, hey, we have gotten significantly better than we were in the past.
Yeah. So yeah, since 124, I think no new unstable APIs are turned on by default. So we've been sort of the long tail of existing unstable APIs has been graduating. So yeah, what Oliver said about like the last 4 releases from a user perspective, it worked exactly the same. Like modulo a bug or a regression, which is unfortunate, and we're trying to improve that as well. But we fixed those, so if you're on latest patch releases, like you shouldn't be experiencing regressions on an upgrade. Hearing that is a user's experience makes me really happy.
Yeah, that's cool that I could give you that feedback. And I would like to know, like, how do you think SEMVer prevents us from having like not so many different versions, so people with those problems could actually get one version certified and then continuously using it for some time?
It's not about continuously using one version for a long time. It's more about upgrades. You won't need these like deprecated API detectors, which, you know, GCP, you can thank Jordan for that one, because Jordan largely engineered that one for GCP. But I mean, there are open source versions of this, right? There are like kube no trouble. These are like open source versions of deprecated AI detectors that we have to use today because we're not SEMVer compliant. And so upgrades become a pain when people are not aware of this or assume that we're SEMVer compliant and try to upgrade and then discover that we're not.
Yeah, I don't think the intent of making upgrades completely backwards compatible is so that you can stay on an existing miner longer. It's so that shifting from one miner to the next miner will not have user visible
Impact.
changes that require them to change anything. So like in the Hacker News thread, so many people were talking about like APIs were unstable and they made breaking changes and they went away and Helm charts had to be fixed and third-party software had to be updated. And I don't know if 100% of that is the case, but I would guess 90+% of that is due to things integrating with beta APIs and assuming they were stable when they weren't. And that's just not a thing we expose by default anymore. And so once the ecosystem works through the 121 to 122 transition, which is painful and a lot of people are stuck there. But I do think the future is better, like significantly better in this respect. And so we don't want to make decisions about LTS processes and costs based on problems that are actually not issues on current versions anymore. I think what Bridget was saying about are there things we could do in terms of documentation or detection or pointing people at some of the detectors or ways to help people bridge that 121 to 122 gap, conversion, migration, detection types of things. That seems like a useful thing to look at. But I don't think difficulty from 121 to 122 specifically should make us make like LTS maintenance decisions about 130 and newer versions necessarily. All right.
Yeah, this might not be a problem anymore, right, Jordan?
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons in the survey we were asking people, what version are you stuck on and why are you stuck? So we can understand, like, is the reason that you're stuck a reason that we've actually already fixed?
In which meeting are you going to aggregate the result of this survey?
It'll be January sometime. I forget when we said the survey would close, but sometime in January or after, we will go through the survey results. There's a lot of like multiple choice questions, but then there's a lot of free text questions, and the free text questions are useful, but also really messy to get sort of aggregated data out of. So we will have to do some bucketing, but we'll probably devote multiple meetings to going through that feedback and looking at it, slicing it different ways. If you're interested in joining, I would suggest you join the mailing list and or the Kubernetes Slack wg-lts channel. We'll probably send out announcements or discussion of that in those channels.
Thank you.
All right. This short meeting turned into a full meeting, but that's fun.
And I put a link in the chat to the Kubernetes Slack inviter. If you don't happen to be on there yet, you can get yourself an invite to that Slack and join channel working group LTS.
Thank you. All right. Well, that is the time we have for today. We'll try to get a survey out. Maybe in January we can start like the alternating time thing. Oh yeah, Han, go ahead.
Yeah. Do these get uploaded?
The meetings?
Yeah.
They get recorded. I am never sure about the recording to
You have to
YouTube
do it
automated.
manually.
Do we?
Yes.
I thought we had.
It's the chair's duty. As a chair, I know.
Okay.
And
But
I
I am
have
failing my duty. Okay. I'll
and then the thing is, when you do upload them, it's good to always notify in the Slack channel that the meeting has been updated so that the Slack channel is not empty and dead looking like on Hacker News.
Yeah, but that was sort of what I was saying I would do with the mailing list is I probably won't wait for the recording to be posted. I'll just include a link to
Agenda.
the feed or whatever so that people can hopefully click it a week after and maybe it'll be there. But I think the last one actually hasn't been posted yet. So maybe we can ping Jeremy to see if he can post that one.
One tip of advice, when you upload the YouTube videos, do it on a private Gmail account. Because if you do it on your company account and you end up leaving the company, those videos get orphaned.
That's awesome. Okay.
Yes. So I always have to switch between my personal and yeah, exactly. It's a huge pain, but
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought we had automation, but we don't, I guess. Okay.
no, we do not.
We'll get that lined up. All right. I'm gonna stop the recording. Thank
Okay.
you all. Have an excellent holiday. See you in January, and we'll catch up in Slack and on the mailing list.
Thanks. Bye.
All right.
Thank you all.